Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Meltzer, the Chief Technology Officer at Tripwire, and today I'm going to be talking to you about continuous monitoring for integrity, an important part of any overall IT security program. As CTO at Tripwire, I've had the opportunity to go around the world and talk to many of our over 2,000 customers, this year entire virtually, of course, about how their integrity monitoring programs have been stood up. What are the best practices that they're using today? And what are some of the attributes of their programs that other organizations like yours may be able to take advantage of? As I share with you the case studies and dig into the details of how these organizations are using integrity assurance, you'll learn about some of their requirements, and hopefully you'll find some similarities and differences that will give you ideas to bring back to your own organization. The agenda today in the next 20 minutes is going to give you a little bit of an introduction to integrity assurance, talk about how it fits into an overall security program, and then I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a maturity model for integrity that I've been developing at Tripwire over the last couple of years and how you can apply it to your own organization. Finally, we're going to go through 4 quick customer studies of actual organizations using integrity assurance effectively. So let's dig into it. Integrity is a key to all security programs. When I think about security overall, I often start with the CIA triad. Most of you are familiar with that triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. I'm going to particularly focus on the integrity piece today. No matter which security framework that you've adopted for your organization, for instance, ISO 2700102, CIS Top 20, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or maybe something a little more focused in your industry, like IEC 62443 on the industrial side, all of them have as key parts of the control frameworks some level of change management or change monitoring. That's absolutely a key control for all of them. For example, in ISO 27001, change monitoring or integrity monitoring is really all over the different controls. It fits into change management, but it also fits into technical compliance checking, and there are several other sections that you'll see references here today that it fits into as well. If you don't know what systems you have, if you don't know how they're configured, whether that's the proper configuration, and whether the changes happening to your systems are actually the ones that are supposed to be happening, there's just no way you can maintain or just plain know if your systems are secure. That's why integrity is such a key piece into all of these frameworks. From a CIS perspective, you could hone in on one particular part of it, like secure configuration monitoring, or just having a basic inventory of your systems and applications, which also requires a deep understanding of system state and how it's changing over time. An effective integrity assurance program is the foundation of all of these different controls. When I start thinking about the value of integrity assurance, you can split that into different parts of the organization that's going to be important to. Let's start with security. Identifying when our unauthorized change is happening and building a forensic trail of what changes are actually occurring and comparing those changes both against past state, but also against desired state. You're answering the questions: how should they be configured? What are your best practices? And how do third-party policies say that these systems and applications should be configured? Being able to map back those internal and external policies against your actual configuration. Compliance is another key aspect. When we think about integrity assurance, just about every compliance standard out there has integrity monitoring. So auditors will often come in and ask you, show me what your change management process looks like. Show me the evidence that you're following that process. And that's what integrity assurance is about from a compliance perspective: demonstrating the evidence, having that key automated control in place to be monitoring for these things, and being able to demonstrate it to external parties. The third part is from an IT operational perspective. When you think about change management, uptime, and availability, the question you're often asking yourself is, what went wrong? And when something did go wrong, what caused it? If you have a reference standard for what changes are happening across all the different aspects of an application, you can very quickly get to the root cause. For example, the database went down on a Saturday, and you go back and see the update was applied Friday evening by the administrator. By Saturday morning, the database stopped working. That's what root cause analysis is about, and can help you improve your uptime and availability as well. When I start thinking about what are the important things you need to know for the integrity of a particular system or business process or application, there's all sorts of information that you need to start considering. The baseline of what you start with is just, how are the systems configured? What changes are happening in that system or in that application state? The problem people often run into is they start and finish with just gather the information about what's changed. I think what we've learned in security over time is just the information itself is just a mountain or an avalanche of data without the ability to make much sense about it. So you really need to start to get into not just what happened, but what should have happened. Was this a desirable or an undesirable change? Was it approved or an unapproved change? Was it something that created risk for the organization that I need to do something about? Or was it something that was part of my business as usual everyday changes? Those things that are happening every day, every week, every month, and maybe I need to forensically log and record that, but maybe I don't want a human involved in reviewing those changes. Getting deep information about what changes are happening and having an effective process for identifying those changes, and then understanding what do you want to do about it. You may need to be able to reconcile those changes back to the source of truth for your organization. And what that source of truth is could be different for different companies. And then it could be a ticketing system that you need to hook back into, or maybe it's a DevOps process for your organization. For a cloud application, you might want to then go automatically remediate the issues. But for many traditional IT systems, automated remediation won't be the answer. It's going to be getting the information to the right application or system owner so that they can go fix the issues. And that might be more about creating that automated workflow to get the information to the right people in your organization, not a technical change to go change something on a system. So these are all different things to think about for your own integrity change management programs. Let me walk you through an example architecture next for what this might look like in a typical IT environment. First, you need to do the data collection. How are we going to gather information about the state of your systems? Agent-based, agent approach using external interfaces like SSH or WMI, SNMP. Once you have that system configuration, you're going to want to do comparisons against policy. Policy could come from a variety of different sources, and often there's some level of tailoring of policies you want to do as well. The next step identifies if the change might have violated your policies. That's answering a different question from did it follow your change control process? Change reconciliation is the step of matching up the actual changes happening in the environment to what was supposed to happen according to your process. The most common thing I see there is hooking into a system like ServiceNow or Cherwell or Remedy. I'll talk in the case studies about some other approaches. Now, whether it's approved or unapproved, the next step would be to identify, is it creating risk? This could be matching the change against some known indicator of compromise, like a framework like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or from threat intelligence sources, or other techniques like malware analysis that could look at specific subsets of changes. Once you have that information, the final step is, how do you want to act on it? And that could be going to the owners of the assets, as I mentioned before, or it could be delivering it into something like a SIM system or a security operations center if it's a high risk change that you want to actually act on, because it actually could be kicking off an incident management process. Typically, the information may also go to a GRC or an IRM system, and that's going to provide evidence for the control being in place and somewhere the auditors can look to see where that evidence is. Exactly what this workflow looks like tends to be very specialized to particular IT environments. That's why it's so important to have tools that can be really flexible to work for your environment, not having to make you re-engineer your IT system just to make the integrity system work. The next thing I'll talk to you about for a minute is a maturity model for integrity that I've been working on. I've adapted this from the US Department of Energy C2M2, Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model. It's a model that you can apply to all sorts of different security domains, but I've taken it and adapted it to integrity assurance, and I've actually simplified it down in these slides to make it really easy to understand in just a couple of minutes. We have a ladder here that's based around MIL, which is maturity indicator levels. That's going to give you an idea on a really simple scale from 0 to 3 of how mature is your current program around integrity. And you can probably do this own assessment in your head as you go if you're really familiar with how your program looks. If you're at maturity indicator level 0, it means you have no visibility into the integrity of your critical systems and applications and business processes. You're just not looking for the information. You don't have a way of gathering it, and you're certainly not doing anything with it. When you move up to maturity indicator level 1, that's when you're collecting the data, but you're still not doing too much with it. If all you're doing is producing evidence for an auditor, often you may get stuck at maturity indicator level 1. Maybe you had a PCI requirement or a particular audit finding that said you had to look for changes to your critical applications. So now you're logging and recording the changes in case anyone asks for it, but you're not actually acting on the data. You haven't actually implemented across the organization, maybe until the next audit points out that you really need to be doing something with the information, not just recording it. Now, when you're actually acting on the data, you're doing something with it, you've built a working process for the organization, you're escalating unidentified, unauthorized changes to the right people, that's maturity indicator level 2. It tends to be at maturity indicator level 2, you have a process that's working, but often I hear that it's taking a lot of time and effort. And so if you really need to now focus on getting the human element out, doing more automated integration, and automating into things like change reconciliation and getting back to the source of truth and escalating things to the right part of the organization automatically, that's when you're starting to get into best-in-class implementations. And that's what I would call maturity indicator level 3. The good news for your organization is no matter where you are from a scale perspective on that maturity indicator level, there's always a next thing to do. So whether you have an audit finding that you need to go act on today, or you already have a working process and you're just looking at how do I improve security, here's some quick tips on how you can take yourself to the next level. If you're at maturity indicator level 0, I'd start thinking about deployment. How am I going to collect and gather the information I need? If you're at level 1, I'd be thinking about building the process. How do you start making use of the data in your organization so you get more value out of the data you're already collecting? At maturity indicator level 2, I'd start thinking about automation. How do I integrate this into different systems? How do I get manual reviews out of this process? And how do I start looking at changes that are only causing a real immediate risk, or if they're causing an evidence that there's an incident happening in your organization? Now, if you're already at maturity indicator level 3, for example, you have a fully automated system working effectively, maybe it's only for the production server environment. So maybe you need to start looking at how do I go deeper, or how do I go more broad across the organization? Maybe there's some other types of assets like OT or cloud assets that you're not covering yet today. Hopefully that gives you some quick tips on the kind of things that you could just assess really quickly. And one of the nice things about my job is I've had the opportunity to go work with a lot of different organizations and see organizations at all different levels of maturity. So now I want to dig into a couple of quick case studies for you of what these organizations actually look like. First case study I want to dig into here is a large international bank. And in this case, this is an organization that's interested in the integrity of both the production systems in their environment, as well as a number of public and private cloud aspects of their infrastructure. For this organization, the elastic piece was really important to them because some of the traditional ways that they had been looking at integrity before they had really gotten into the cloud just weren't moving at the pace they needed to move in their more modern cloud elastic environment. For them, the real focus of integrity was around configuration standards. They needed to make sure that when they were deploying new systems, these systems were securely configured against their standards at deployment time and throughout the entire life cycle after deployment. They continued to make sure that these standards that they set up for each one of their applications and platforms were met. And because they were a heavy DevOps shop, they were particularly focused on making sure that the integration was directly into their DevOps processes. So when systems were built, they could immediately and automatically get assessed to see if these systems met their configuration standards. When I think about the maturity of the organization, the first thing I think about is the scale of the visibility, needing to be able to scale this up over time to 1 million assets or more. The challenge of executing at that scale versus something that's an order of magnitude smaller really pushed this organization for automation. For this company, it was the application and system owners who are responsible for meeting their configuration standards. The job of the security team was going to make sure that they could organizationally report and get that information out to the different system owners. And that, for this company, was many different groups, many different people spread around the world that need to be able to get this information. So being able to consolidate that into a unified reporting and dashboard system was really important to them. And automation, of course, was really critical because of the scale. They just can't even think about doing this manually in the way that smaller organizations might be able to work around it. In many ways, the configuration standard aspect of what this organization did is a really mature implementation. I'm going to contrast that, though, with the next example, a company whose focus was much more around the integrity of their change management process in a really advanced DevOps process. So the second example I'm going to dig in for you is a large wireless carrier. And this is an organization serving in the ballpark of 100 million customers. They've been doing integrity management for a number of years, but over the last couple of years, the adoption of a new DevOps CI/CD pipeline has really changed how they think about integrity and change, particularly in their production server environment. For this organization, if you're going to make a change to a production server, you're going to check in a Puppet module or a Chef recipe into a GitHub repository. Puppet's going to then pull that module out of source code repositories through the pipeline and push that configuration out to the production server environment. For them, what they really needed to be able to do is continuously monitor that production server environment and make sure that every change was following that pipeline. If they could trace the change all the way back to the approved administrator who committed that into source repository, all the way through to the production server environment, they felt really good about their change management control. Conversely, if someone just logged into the system directly, like rather than follow the pipeline, they SSH into a Unix box and started editing files, or even worse, a third-party process they didn't even know about started editing files, those are the kind of changes they needed to know about right away. And they wanted to actually escalate those issues directly to their security operations center. So this organization had really mature monitoring across that environment. And one of the things I really liked when I heard from them about how they implemented it is once their administrators and IT teams knew they were continuously monitoring the change control process, the shortcuts people were taking to circumvent the process stopped very quickly. So again, a really nice example of mature process around reconciling changes in an automated way focused around a DevOps environment. Third example I want to give you is a power generation distribution organization. This company is in a highly regulated environment, and this means they had a variety of different regulations to adhere to, in their case, in 3 different distinct environments: a corporate IT environment, a regulated environment that had to do with their actual power generation systems, and third, a nuclear environment, which had its own even more stringent requirements around them, including things like data diodes and unidirectional communication that made monitoring in some ways much more challenging. The production of evidence across multiple auditors was a real burden for the organization. So implementing a continuous monitoring approach helped them significantly simplify and reduce the audit prep time they required, as well as giving them more confidence they were going to pass those audits. And for them, the key aspect of automation was integration back to their ServiceNow change ticketing system. Being able to reconcile tickets that were happening within their environment to the tickets that were being documented, and then being able to escalate and open tickets for the issues that needed to then be dealt with from a change perspective was really important to them. The other key aspect that was really valuable for this organization was getting a single view that unified the view of IT and OT assets that were in scope, meaning they were able to cross their IT, their OT, and their nuclear environments with the same tool set adapted to different policies and regulations that they needed to adhere to. Lots of operational documentation and process was in place for this organization, and I think that's pretty common. The more highly regulated you are, the more focus there is around process and procedures. The nice aspect of this company is it wasn't just they had procedures, but they had automated reconciliation of change in the environment. So they had automated implementing the procedures too. The last example I want to give you here today is a large government entity. For this organization, they had implemented a lot of manual process around their system owners review changes, but there were some aspects of their process that I thought was pretty mature that I thought I would share as well. So even without automation, they did some really nice things. One of the things they did really well is they had a really good, well-documented runbook. The runbook defined how the program had been stood up, why, and how it needed to be run on an ongoing daily and weekly basis. The whole runbook wasn't very long, and I think that was important because I think it's a lot more useful to have a quick runbook people can read than 100 pages documenting procedures that nobody can understand. Think about your integrity program. Do you have a runbook for reconciling changes that exists in a single, easily consumable package? Or is it in the head of one person in your organization? Or is it reams of documents nobody really reads? Having something that's really a quick handbook type runbook can really help you build a sustainable program over time. Hopefully these examples have given you something to think about for your own organization's programs. Tripwire has been a leader in helping thousands of organizations around the world build and mature their integrity assurance programs for over 20 years, encompassing everything from the factory floor to modern cloud native applications, in addition to traditional IT environments. So no matter where you think you are from a maturity indicator level, if you're just looking at how do I first start collecting the data I need, all the way to you're looking to get yourself into the next level of maturity by incorporating real-time visibility, existing integrations to your existing IT infrastructure, or automating compliance against multiple standards and system types, Tripwire has the experience, the experts, and the technology to help. We offer our solutions as software that you can deploy and run on your own, or as cloud-hosted services where we pair our Tripwire experts in running these programs with the proven Tripwire technology. That technology can be hosted in different public cloud regions around the world or within your own private cloud environment. Thank you so much for your time today.